King Harald V of Norway has died at the age of 89. He was Europe's oldest living monarch, was taken to hospital last week where he was being treated for a bacterial infection in his blood. Well, let's bring in our royal commentator, Alistair Bruce. Alistair, a good morning to you. Your reflections on the news of King Harald's passing.
Well, it's immensely sad for Norway. He's been the most stable and steady sovereign for that nation since he came to the throne in 1991. There was a great affection for him, which we saw played out over the last few days as people gathered in front of the royal palace in Oslo. And I think for King Harald, who has had at his side, and right to the point of his death, the love of his life, Queen Sonia, he provided for the nation the great stability it needed through quite a lot of changes and challenges and political movement. And I think that for him, he has always continued that tradition that he inherited from his father, King Olaf, who guided the nation through all the elements after the Second World War, and his grandfather, King Haakon, who came to the throne when Norway chose to be a monarchy in 1905. So he's the third of the line who have served Norway. And he has always been very, very dedicated to the work that he did. And he will be greatly missed because as a constitutional monarch, he has been the absolute template.
We saw there pictures of King Harald with the late Queen Elizabeth. How was he received around Europe in other European courts?
Well, of course, he was very close to Elizabeth II and indeed to our king because they are relations. King Harold's grandmother was Princess Maud of the United Kingdom, the daughter of Edward VII. There were great links. King Harold was here regularly. He was a mad, keen fisherman and was often in Scotland. And so he was probably over in the United Kingdom 3 or 4 times a year. So there's great links there. I think in the family of monarchs and of heads of state of Europe, he was very well known. He had a great sense of humor. He was very pragmatic, and he could always see the funny thing in things. A friend of mine who went fishing with him arrived at an airport in Scotland, and the driver came up to King Harald and said, "Are you the King of Norway?" And he said, "No," pointing at his friend who'd come with. He said, "He is." So he had a sort of sense of humor always with him. And I think that it was his steadiness, his humor, and his determination to uphold the Constitution that made him the effective ruler that he was. And he's prepared his son, Haakon, who has been acting as regent, who is now King of Norway, and he will probably be King Haakon the Eighth. And that will all be announced in the process of these things when he has held his extraordinary Council of State later today.
And that is the process. Actually, on that joke, Alistair, I feel like I remember you telling me a similar joke that the Queen had delivered about one time when she was approached by a member of the public in Scotland, pretending it wasn't actually her. So the royals can make us laugh from time to time. You talk about the process then. Crown Prince Haakon will take the throne. What is the process in the Norwegian royal family for the change of head of state?
Well, the moment the king died, King Harald died, then Haakon became king. And he would have ensured that the Parliament and that the Prime Minister and everybody else had been informed of the death of the former king, and then immediately needs to hold an extraordinary Council of State where he will formally declare that his father, King Harald, has died and that he is now king and that he has taken command of government. Now, I know that sounds quite serious, but he is, of course, a constitutional monarch, and constitutionally, it is a democracy. So, but he holds the levers now of government. He has actually been acting as regent for some time because his father was so ill, but it will be a matter of time. There's no coronation in Norway. In due course, he will go to Trondheim Cathedral, where he will be, as it were, confirmed into his role in the traditional place where, going back through history, Norwegian kings had been crowned. So it is a process, but today, for the new king and for the Queen Sylvia, Queen Sonia, who was married to King Harold. It's a very, very sad day, and our thoughts are with them. And that for all the Norwegian royal family, they have been gathering at the hospital. They've been with the king, and I dare say most of them were with him at the moment he died.
Alistair, you said that Norway chose to become a monarchy in 1905. Give us the history of that in the Norwegian state and why it took that path all that time ago.
Well, Norway was part of Sweden, and there was a movement to create an independence for Norway. And when they chose to become independent at the beginning of the 20th century, they wanted to have a king, and there was some bargaining as to who would be acceptable to all the other monarchies of Europe. And in the end, it was one of the Danish princes, and he was persuaded to leave Denmark and go to become the king. But he wouldn't accept to do that until there had been a vote in Norway to prove that that was what they want. The Norwegians went to the ballot and they said they wanted to become a monarchy in 1905. And so the Prince of Denmark sailed into Oslo and was created King Haakon VII. And of course, his wife was Maud. She was an English princess who he had married. I think that neither of them had had any plans of taking on anything quite so extraordinary. So it was a great change of life. And I think partly that's why the Norwegians have taken to this Danish family that came and volunteered to be their monarchs and have guided them through so much. Now, King Harald, who's just died, as a young boy, he was born in 1937, was part of the great challenge faced by King Haakon of all having to escape Oslo when Nazi Germany attacked Norway in 1940. And indeed, he went with his mother over the hill with his two sisters, and they arrived at the border of Sweden where they were held. It was very difficult for Sweden. Sweden refused to let them in. So as a little boy, he was part of this challenge that Norway faced during the Second World War, which was pretty much existential. And of course, he lived most of his time in America during the war with his mother while the war carried on. And he was back in 1940 as a young boy waving the Norwegian flag. And he's been waving that Norwegian flag right up to the day he died, which we now mark today.
It's incredible history, and incredible as well that people would vote to install a monarchy back in 1905. Just tells you sort of how long ago that was, maybe in people's minds. Mention again, if you can, Alistair, King Harold's connections with the UK and the family connection with our royal family.
So King Edward VII was king in the United Kingdom as the son of Queen Victoria from 1901 to 1910. He had a number of daughters, one of whom was Maud, and she married what appeared to be a rather unimportant Danish prince. And that prince was then invited by Norway to become its king, as I say, in 1905. So there are very strong links, and King Harald was one of the descendants of Queen Victoria. So I think the links were very great. And particularly going back to the Second World War, because it was the anvil on which Norway was truly tested, and the sheer courage of the Norwegians who had to deal with the terrifying leader Quisling, who gave a new word to the English language. And King Haakon VII, the late king who's just died's grandfather, operated in London in exile, and so did the government. And Norwegians were incredibly brave at trying to defend their nation against Nazi Germany and the expulsion of Jews to death camps and everything like that, that weighed very heavily on the Norwegians. But the courage of the Norwegians in defending was very much bound up in Haakon VII. And I think that this new king, whose grandson has now just died, created exactly what Norway wanted in creating its own new identity as a nation, created a figurehead around which all could gather. And now that nation will look to King Harald's son, Haakon, who is the King of Norway now.
Talk to us about the royal family in Norway at the moment and how they are seen by the Norwegian population. There have been headlines in recent years, criminal cases, a member of the royal family or a son of the crown princess, who's not a member of the royal family, sent to prison, and other controversies. What is the current sort of status of the royals among Norwegians, in your understanding?
It's not an easy situation for the new King of Norway. His wife met Marit, who will probably become Queen of Norway. He married after she had been previously married and had had a son. That son has been in some difficulty. He was accused, taken to courts and put under, he's basically been found guilty. And so that has created a real difficulty, but also met Marit, admitted to being connected to Jeffrey Epstein. These are difficulties that don't directly fall upon the new King of Norway, but they are present. And the Norwegians, they're an evolving nation, and it'll be up to the new king to, as it were, fulfill his father's capacity to earn the respect of Norway, and it'll be down to the new king to do the same. I sense that there's no move at the moment to turn Norway into being a republic, but all things can change, and it's a democratic nation. And I know that King Haakon will take very seriously the responsibility that he has to answer to the requirements and needs of his nation. But he's had in his late father, King Harald V, a tremendous guide, and he's been very close to his father. Particularly, we saw in the last days where, in fact, last night he didn't leave the side of the hospital bed of his father. So, he must have been present at the moment that his father was gathered and at the moment that he became king. It's a challenge for them. The new king's sister, she was also involved in difficulties. She'd been married recently, and not everybody in Norway was content or happy. It's caused great difficulties. There've been arguments. But, families are complicated places. And I think what is key here is, can the new king meet the requirements of Norway at a challenging time? And I sense that Haakon has all the capacity from learning from his father, King Harald V, to do exactly that.
As finally then, King Haakon now has taken the throne, there will, I imagine, be a period of mourning and then a state funeral for King Harald.
Yes, and they do that very beautifully in Norway. And in due course, that will be announced. It's generally about 13 days after the death of the monarch. And it will be a procession through Oslo to the principal church and then down to the burial place, which is in the castle at the water's edge. And it is, of course, there where so much of what was significant in the Second World War took place, and it's where the other kings lie at rest. And then there will be the inauguration of the new king at Trondheim Cathedral. But the mourning period will be announced. And I'm sure that in the United Kingdom, the king will want to mark with mourning within the court and the royal family. And probably we will see that the household division, which are the guards division, will wear black armbands. But beyond that, the United Kingdom only showing that loyalty and family link to a nation that is one of the European monarchies. So it will be marked. But, for Norway, this is, it's a sad day. But at 89, King Harald V, who had suffered a great deal of ill health, has been gathered, and it is the end of a reign where he has really served Norway well.